Winnipeg. I should wait.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Resilience Research Institute of Canada, I welcome you all into this special webinar series organized by Jennifer. She is the practicum student with the Arthur V. Morrow Institute for Peace and Justice. Today we have requested two guests from far away from Canada, and we are very happy to host them in a moderated discussion today. And before we begin, traditionally, we do treaty recognition. And let me recognize where the land and where the Conflict and Resilience Research Institute is located. So we are located in the original land of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that are made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So once again, dear audience, welcome to special webinar. I would like to welcome at this stage Jennifer to take over the facilitation role, and she will lead the whole session today. And at the end, I will once again appear to assist her in concluding the session. So without further ado, Jennifer, floor is yours. Please take over.
Thank you, Dr. Bosa. Okay. So good afternoon from Winnipeg. Yeah. So our first presenter is Engineer David Osafo Adonteng. He holds a senior position currently in the public sector, and he has directed various programs in transportation and road safety issues in Ghana since 1990 up to now. He has served on several boards for both public and private institutions in Ghana and across West Africa. He is currently the Director for Planning and Program at the National Road Safety Authority in Ghana. He doubles as the head of technical training, automation of police enforcement operations, and also the head of Global Road Safety Branch in Ghana. He is presenting on the topic, Road Safety Challenges in the Era of COVID-19 Pandemic. May we kindly give him the audience, and questions will be taken after his presentation. Thank you. Mr. Adonteng, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and good evening to all of you, my good friend, Doctor, as well. I'm happy to join you this evening to discuss managing road safety challenges in the era of COVID-19 pandemic. And this is the Ghana's case. Next, please. I think that if it comes to COVID, Ghana recorded its first case in March 2020. In fact, we had the first two cases on the 12th of March 2020, when two infected people came to Ghana, one from Norway, one from Turkey. But by the end of the month, there had been about 152 confirmed cases. And we had about 125 active cases going into April. So March and April already, 152 cases had been confirmed in Ghana. Mind you, also Ghana put in place mechanisms to ensure recovery. So 22 were recovered. Next, please. Now, looking at these statistics, well, even at that time, it looks quite alarming because we never expected it to even hit the country. Now, it came in. So the president, we call our president Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, he began with some addresses to the nation concerning the pandemic. He made some announcements to which contain some restrictions in the first place to manage the spread. Now, he announced a couple of things and also gave confidence to the public, especially about government preparedness and their response plans, specifically talking about $100 million to contain the virus. So this was the initial capital investment that government committed itself to deal with the pandemic. Next, please. Now, there were some initial government commitments in terms of restrictions. This, I call it stringent measures. First of all, there was a ban on public gatherings, including conferences, workshops, funerals, festivals, political rallies. 2020 in Ghana was an election year. And so it was very important that I mentioned political rallies, church activities, and all related events. Government closed down all beaches, schools. It was only the final year students who were allowed to go to school to complete their examinations. The country's borders were closed, and passport services were all suspended. So traveling to Ghana was difficult. From countries which had recorded over 200 positive cases were not allowed to enter the country, and they were discouraged. I think with the exception of those who had special permits were allowed into the country. So these were some stringent measures that government initially started with. Next, please. On the 30th of March 2020, there was a partial lockdown of Accra and Kumasi. Accra happens to be the capital of Ghana. Kumasi is the second capital city. So these were the two cities that we targeted earlier on. And under the partial lockdown, there were a few exceptions. And I must mention that the executive and legislature, the judiciary, we have the services organizations, those who were into production, marketing, food, beverages, pharmaceuticals, medicine, paper and plastic packages, media, and telecommunications. And I must say also that transport was affected. So these were the areas that had the hard hit under the partial lockdown announced by government. Next, please. Then we entered April. In the month of April, the figures had increased to 2,074 at the end of the month. We were still under the lockdown. So you could imagine that from March and April, just 2 months, Ghana had already hit 2,000 plus of these infected people of its populace. We had people coming from Togo and Benin and other countries, bordering countries. Even under the border closure, I think people found some way of entering into the country. And here, let me use the opportunity to introduce to you very quickly, because I'm mentioning Togo and Benin. Ghana is in West Africa and is bounded by these countries I'm mentioning: Togo, the east, and then the west we have Cote d'Ivoire. The north we have Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and so we happen to be within these countries, and the borders were such that people were coming through because they appeared to be porous. 190 patients recovered in April, so it means that there were some measures in place to contain the situation. So let's note the figure: 2,074 in April. Next, please. There were stricter, stringent measures. Government introduced other measures, including mandatory public use of the nose mask, I believe everywhere across the world we could see this. Alcohol-based hand sanitizers to be used by the populace at all times. Social distancing, as well as continuous hand washing and mass fumigations of public places, including schools, markets, as part of efforts to contain the spread. So as we move on into the months, measures were being put in place one way or the other by government to contain the spread. Next, please. Then we entered May. The figures went up to, well, 5,807 were new cases, and this added up to 7,881. May, still under lockdown, and the death toll had risen to 36, double the figure in the past month. Now, public transport vehicle operators were given directives to enforce in-vehicle physical distancing and all the safety protocols. 98% of transport operators adhered to the guidance on physical distancing. I am mentioning transport because that is where I want to narrow my presentation to. Next, please. So in June 2020, government eased the lockdown. There were 9,860 new cases, and added to the numbers, the total went up to 17,741. The death toll had tripled to 112. So beginning June, there was some relaxation of these restrictions. Example, religious services were allowed, private burials, weddings, and other social gatherings with restricted numbers, though the country's borders still remain closed. So 17,741. Let's note that also. Next, please. Because I cannot go through individually all the months, I am taking you all the way to December 2020. And at the end of the year, this is what was happening in Ghana. December alone added 3,104. And so the total cases came up to 53,333. And the deaths rose to 330. So this is clearly demonstrated with a diagram that you can see. From March to December 2020, started from a zero all the way with peaking at somewhere around June 2020, and then started dropping because of some of the measures that government put in place, to the extent that at December, we had dropped to 3,104. So this is what was happening. And so I will quickly just mention the peak to bring to attention that from April to July thereabout happened to be where the situation was worse as a result of the infections. Next, please. This is the deaths. So you can see from April to August thereabout, we got our peak. Starting all the way from March to December. And this time I have even added up to January 2021. So clearly, the period between April, June, July, and August happened to be the worst months in 2020 for COVID-19 in Ghana. Next, please. Transport and safety. Commercial passenger transport operators claimed that the imposition of the restrictions affected their operations. So the operators started agitating But they justified their position with reasons including road safety as one of the bases to win public sympathy. I think this is where my institution came in, when road safety was mentioned, because otherwise we had thought that the issue of COVID was purely a public health matter. But this time around, institutions justifying the need for some recognition in their operations have mentioned road safety as one of the key factors or the basis for their justification. And so this is where I come in. Next. In the partial lockdown, the months from April to June, everything came to a standstill, including travels. Nothing moved. The roads were virtually free from both human and vehicular traffic. So the lead agency where I work, the National Road Safety Authority in Ghana, and our key stakeholders, including the police, were inactive. There were no budgets from government to operate. So automatically you recognize what the situation could be. Next. Now we started interrogating the situation using statistics. We first of all looked at our statistics on deaths, in fact, crashes and injuries, but I'm using the deaths as a basis for my discussion this evening. Whilst in 2010, we recorded deaths on the road to the tune of 1,986, by the end of the year 2020, we had recorded 2,589. So there was a sharp rise if you look at the trend. Between 2019 and 2020, sharp rise. And so it gave an alarm and opened our eyes to look further into what could have happened between 2019 and 2020 with that sharp rise. Next. So we look further into the monthly crashes and the deaths. What I showed you earlier, the graph was looking at the annual, and the annual showed clearly that 2020 was the worst of, unprecedented, recording figures on our road in terms of fatalities, 2,589. So we went into the monthly contributions from March, April, May, June, July, all the way to December. And this is what story we have to tell. In terms of from March to December, road crashes averagely around 200, 1,000, or 2,000, 1,000, 1,800, 1,900. Then we hit 2,549 at the end of December. Another sharp rise from November. And that also opened our eyes as to what the situation could be. We were still then interrogating, because we needed a basis to think through and make some meaningful correlation from this. Next, please. What you saw earlier was the crashes. Now this is the deaths as far as road crashes are concerned. You could also see the trend month by month, and from November to December, we saw also another crisis, a sharp rise, another sharp rise from April to June. And remember, I told you there was some lockdown somewhere from April to June. And so what do we derive from the situation where there was a lockdown? And I said earlier that the lockdown created a situation where everything came to a standstill. Very few vehicles were running. Very few human beings were walking along the road. And so how come that sharp crisis from March to June? Another question to be answered by all of us. So this is also another basis for us to interrogate. Next, please. Now, we try to marry the two, comparing COVID cases and road crash cases. this is the picture we are getting. The one you see peaking is the COVID cases, and the almost flattened is the road cases. Comparatively, I think you will agree with me that there was no significant correlation, except from the fact that September to December appear to have something in common. So if you look at the 4 months ending September, October, November, and December, the two lines appear to be intersecting, stabilizing. And so it is also something for us to interrogate more. Otherwise, one would say that there is no significant correlation between the two. But let us note the last 4 months where we found some correlation. Next, please. This is about the deaths. The first one was the cases. Now, can we find any correlation here where you have the COVID cases on the one below and the road cases on at the top? And this is about the deaths. Again, there's no visible significant correlation here, except that the partial lockdown period, March to June, or April to June, there appeared to be some rising trend. I think this is also an area that we need to interrogate a bit more, giving some interesting and excitement situations for us to interrogate. The last portion, getting to the end of the year, did not show much of any significance statistically to us. The lockdown periods is where we are targeting currently. Next, please. Our preliminary observations or investigation have revealed first 1 year of COVID-19 pandemic experience in Ghana has not shown much basis to determine any scientific or statistical correlation with road safety in terms of cases and deaths. In the partial lockdown from April to June, however, and in December, it appeared to show some similarities in trend, and that is the rising cases and the deaths in both COVID cases and road crash cases and their respective deaths. So these were the areas that appear to have some level of correlation, but generally, we have not found any correlation yet, with the exception of the partial lockdown periods, April to June and then December, which appear to be a bit more exciting to us. Next, please. Our observation continues. We have seen for the first 2 months in January, in 2021, January and February, something is emerging. What you see is a trend of the deaths or the cases associated with COVID-19 and road crashes. And clearly, we are seeing some correlation picking up. The trends have the same direction. The rate of occurrence or the rate of add-ons also appear to be the same. And I'm talking about the gradient at 0.2897 in the case of the crashes, and then 0.2387 in the case of the COVID situation. So if you look at this clearly, something is emerging and is visible. And so we are beginning to have some change of mind that moving on, there could be a situation where we can have a good story to tell between the two, road crashes, road safety, and then COVID-19 situation. Next. We would want to make some conclusion based on our observations. COVID-19 may have impacted negatively on road crashes and casualties, but too early to draw conclusions yet. We could make some few practical observations though. First, during the lockdown, the few motorists that were allowed to operate on our roads might have taken advantage of the free road space and the absence of road safety measures because we were not there, especially the police. And they might have misbehaved, especially when it comes to overspeeding and other behaviors contrary to what the law requires. The police were not there. The National Road Safety Authority were also not there. The road space was free. And I think that what comes to mind clearly is perhaps excessive speeding or overspeeding. Now, motorists, and here especially about our commercial transport operators and businesses, might have also made hasty moves on the road after government eased the lockdown. In other words, businesses, transport operators, and everybody who might have lost some investments were trying to do something to make up for the loss. And so in that situation, they might have taken some hasty decisions while driving or acting on the road. Next. It is also one of our observations that anxiety in society might have set in among the people, especially our traders. Some of them highly anticipated a future lockdown and perhaps with even harsher living conditions if the infection rate went up. So what happens mostly is that you would have to hurriedly and hastily do things in a manner that you can prepare yourself for any eventualities. If you transfer, most of them who transferred this kind of anxiety to the road messed up and did what is uncalled for and might have contributed to the crashes and the deaths when government eased the lockdowns, which means that COVID has created a situation where people cannot predict what would come in the near future. Everything I'm doing now must be done very quickly. If it is to prepare myself, then when the eventuality or the unexpected happens, I should be in a position to accommodate the hardships. If you transfer this situation onto the ground and within the road space, all what we can see will be a rise in the crashes and the deaths. So we were not surprised at all. Next, please. Another thing we observed in our concluding part is that the public generally have entertained some fear of, well, getting infected with the COVID in public transport and in buses, especially those who were not ready to comply with the wearing of nose masks, hand washing, and so on, those safety protocols. And so most changed their transport mode from the public transport, that is vehicles, to motorcycles. And this is the problem we had. You could see that the crashes involving those who use motorcycles and tricycles in Ghana moved all the way, if you look at 2019 and 2020, a sharp rise from 210 deaths in 2010, rising systematically all the way. But a sharp rise happened 2019, 2020. And we attribute it to the fact that more people have now switched on from vehicles or buses into motorcycles. Like you see in the picture. This is a market woman going to the market who previously would use a taxi, a vehicle taxi or a motor bus. Now they are using motorcycles, carrying her load at the same time. So one of the repercussions, the negative adverse repercussions of COVID. Next, please. Now, moving forward, I have already said that it is too early to predict and draw conclusions, though. But there is enough evidence to suggest that traffic volumes fell sharply, as did the number of road crashes, persons killed and persons injured within that space. Speeds were increased. People worked beyond their capacities to the extent that drivers operated tiredly at all times because they wanted to do more to make up for the losses. We call it fatigue. And also there were low police enforcement on our roads. Again, these are clear evidence of the fact that crashes, deaths, and injuries could increase within a period where COVID has taken over the entire country. Next, please. Again, moving forward, there are very important issues that we need to take into consideration. All of us must be monitoring the situation. We must continue to gather relevant data, especially on the following. And this we should do during lockdowns because it is likely some countries will still lock down. And also during periods that we see the COVID being at its highest peaks or crisis levels. We need traffic volumes. We need data on road crashes and casualties. We need data on travel speeds. We also need data on traffic behavior and infractions. I think that we should challenge ourselves as road safety managers across the world. I'm not talking just about Ghana. I'm talking about Africa and the whole world. We need data. So we should keep monitoring the situation. It is new. We don't have enough information of its behavior. What will happen, we cannot predict the next day or the next year for that matter. But we must accept the fact that it has come to stay with us. So we should continue the monitoring and gather relevant data to help our future plans. Next. We consider ourselves in crisis moment. Perhaps Canada, you are a bit more reactive or active than us in Africa. We see ourselves in a crisis moment. The number of deaths and the number of casualties or cases keeps rising. And so as road safety managers, we need to restore and maintain public confidence in the use of the road. And I think that is the more reason why some of us have taken up this responsibility to see how we can restore that confidence for the use of the road. Now, to us, is a good time to remind the public about the importance of road safety and the adoption of good and responsible behavior by all road users to save their lives on the roads during and beyond COVID. COVID or no COVID, we must survive on the road. Much as I'm ready to give confidence to them, I think people must also be reminded of the need for them to take responsibility, change their behaviors positively when they find themselves in traffic. Next. We are communicating through radio, television, social media, under a broad national campaign framework we called Arrive Alive. Arrive Alive means that in whichever capacity you find yourself and wherever you're going to, once you use the road, you must arrive alive. You must get to your destination alive. We are promoting also the national COVID-19 safety protocols at lorry terminals. Commercial passengers are being engaged, drivers are being engaged to comply with government directives on the protocols as far as COVID-19 is concerned. We have also restored the police presence on the roads for enforcement of the road traffic laws and regulations. So these are some practical measures that we are undertaking as far as road safety management is concerned within this COVID-19 period. Next, please. So one of our tools that we use, it might not look too good for you in Canada, but that in our space here in Ghana, it is so relevant to us. The Arrive Alive campaign, road safety campaign, we are asking people to drive safe or to stay safe. You wash your hands regularly, you nose up mask, you wear your nose masks at all times, and then you also practice the social distancing. These are the messages we are sending around in our road safety management practice. I am ending soon. Next, please. I want to say that the concerns of transport operators relating to their loss of revenue has not been addressed. There is a potential conflict coming because that can be a threat to safety and security. And this is where I'll charge my good friend Jennifer, learn hard. When you come to Ghana, you have work to do. You will come and help us address this conflict because I understand you are learning about conflicts, security situations. If we are unable to solve this problem, what will happen is that the whole transport industry can break down. What the transport operators have raised is that government, in the course of managing the pandemic, raised some financial support for certain hard-hit industries. Example, the banking, the manufacturing industry sectors, and so on. But they left out the transport sector. And so there is agitation, which happens to be part of road safety management in Ghana, that failure of government to support them financially, they may have to then lay down their tools, or somehow they will raise transport fares to make up for the losses. So I foresee conflict and I foresee security threats. And so this is why I'm challenging my good friend to be up and doing and come and help us solve this particular problem in Ghana. We are inspired by political leaders in this country, our president in particular. We have our health officials and institutions constantly sharing information with us and providing some direction. And I think it's very exciting and refreshing. Next. I will end my presentation here. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I think this can serve as a basis for us to look into, further interrogate the matters as we continue to gather data, share information amongst ourselves, both locally, Ghana, West Africa, Africa, Europe, America, and the world at large. And that is the only way we can have the basis to demonstrate to ourselves how we can practically put in place the necessary measures to deal with the pandemic. Whether we like it or not, pandemic has come to stay with us. And we must also do something within the road space to save lives and properties. Thank you very much.
I guess, can we take few questions now? And the audience, please hold on a bit. The theme for this webinar is managing conflict and sustaining peace dividends amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, and then to our viewers, we have received questions from you, and they are being flashed now. But if you still want to ask a few questions, you can go ahead now, please. Can't hear anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Kojoche? Yes. In dealing with the police and monitoring COVID in local buses that are mostly congested with passengers. I think that what I said, every year we have budgets to operate. Now, budget is released by government. During COVID, government machineries were down. You go to the Ministry of Finance, you go to the Ghana Road Fund, where we take our traditional sources of funds, and you don't find anybody there working to sign your checks for you. And so you are handicapped financially. Everybody was afraid. A few of us who attempted, the police were all infected. If you go to Parliament, for example, at the moment as I speak to you, we have almost about a third of parliamentarians who are infected. So the situation was crucial. All we could do in some cases was to use Zoom or virtual meetings, and they were not effective. Now imagine a typical road, somebody driving from the southern part to the northern part of Ghana without police. So we could not sustain our campaigns. We could not sensitize people and create that awareness enough. So financially we're handicapped, and we needed money to engage, even if it is through virtual. We needed money for the police to push a few of the policemen to be on the roads. So money actually were not coming. And so we had to drop so many of our programs. And that is where the money comes in. The police currently have now been challenged based on some of these problems or challenges to begin to use cameras in Ghana. So very soon you will find the first camera installed on our roads or road network, which will do virtually like we are doing now. The cameras are now going to monitor the road 24/7, identify misbehaviors, and then you will be apprehended also through electronic. So you see, pandemic, though physically affected us, but somehow has given us an opportunity to think and think hard into now bringing ICT into our police operations. And I think that is a positive part of it. So we are learning a lot of lessons from this. I don't know if you have answered all your questions, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It seems Louis, you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Jennifer, for the opportunity to ask a question. Thank you, Engineer David Osafo, for the very comprehensive presentation and also articulating very well the measures that has been put in place both by government and your outfit to address the issues of road accidents and protect life. I just wanted you to clarify, because you made a statement getting to the end of your presentation where you underscore that we are in crisis, which means Ghana is in crisis. And I know you said that based on the death toll, but also on the principle that every life matter. And therefore, if a single life is even lost on the road, then it gives cause for alarm. But at the same time, we have read very widely within the media where Ghana is lauded as among the countries that have been able to really manage this whole COVID pandemic situation very well. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to juxtapose your statement with this and probably clarify just for the purposes of listeners across. Over.
Thank you very much, Louis. I recognize the fact that Ghana is one of the leading countries at the forefront of fighting COVID. But you know one thing about Ghana, so interesting. Where everybody talks about 100, we want to talk about 1. When we have 10, we see it as a problem. We are always striking for excellence. You know, we have said that we want to be the gateway to Africa, even in economics. So Ghana to be, in the near future, the think tank and powerhouse of Africa, not Nigeria. Ghana, right from independence, we were the first country to have gotten independence, sub-Saharan African countries. And you see how we managed to use our resources, our strength and knowledge and efforts to get all Africa on board. We do not want any Ghanaian to die as a result of the pandemic. When 1 person dies, we are worried. Well, the world can see 10 people die as relatively better, but we don't accept it. It's like road traffic crashes. When we are talking about 2,589 deaths, you go to Ethiopia, for example, and perhaps the fatality may be about 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 or 10,000. But that is not our problem. Our problem is that we always want to be the lead. And so we don't accept it. I have gone to conferences where I made presentation and talked about 2,500 deaths. And somebody from the participant would say, are you worried about that? Because we are killing 20,000. So to him, Ghana shouldn't have even been at the conference at all, because you don't have a problem. We are talking about 50,000 deaths and you are talking about 2,500 deaths. But I still made it an issue that no, I needed to come because I do not want even 1 to die. So our strive for excellence is what is making me feel that we are in crisis, because I want to accept the fact that more than 200 people have died because of COVID. If it can be contained, let's just make every effort we can to contain it and save everybody from it. We do not want to see always Europe, America, Canada, Europe, America, Canada. They are helping. They are also champions in their own world. But we can also be champions. We from Africa, we can do it. It's a can do. We can do it. And so that is why I want us to tune our minds that even if it is 1, it can still be a crisis to us. We don't accept it. Louis, I think that's my position.
Thank you very much. Okay. I guess, Dr. Kosa, can we move on to the second speaker? Okay. So our second speaker is Mr. Louis Cookman. He is a senior managerial level international development professional with over 14 years experience in development work, with focus on supporting nation states in the design and implementation of programs and projects aimed to achieve peace, eradication of poverty, and the reduction of inequalities and exclusion. At the country level, He has been providing high-level strategic leadership and working closely with the key state actors and development partners in the domestication and implementation of global development agendas, transition from the Millennium Development Goal to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in line with national priority. He is currently the Deputy Resident Representative for UNDP in Eritrea, and he doubles as the head of program also in Eritrea. He is presenting on the topic Role of International Organization in Conflict Interventions and Peace Building. Mr. Kupen, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you very much, Dr. Kosa and the whole team for this opportunity to share some thoughts this evening around the role of international organizations in peace building. I want to use I hope, Jennifer, I hope you can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Okay, so I am using the case of interventions that UNDP Ghana made, and they built up to the Dabon conflict in northern Ghana, the roadmap up to the point of the conflict resolution. Next slide. Okay, so just like Dr. Engineer David said in as part of his presentation, Ghana is one of the pre-colonial countries that was first to gain independence in South Africa. It is made up of heterogeneous society characterized by internal dualism of both formal and informal institutions, with modern structures that are evolving post-colonialism. In many instances, though you have these modern structures and institutions, they haven't in any way replaced the traditional settings or the traditional institutions which more or less complement the governance system both formally and informally. Next slide. Now, Ghana is often held as a beacon of peace. If you read a lot of the literature, they tell you that Ghana is a gateway. It is a beacon of peace. One, because since 1992, it has conducted several successful free and fair elections, peacefully transitions power from one political party to the other. And just December 2020, there was yet another general elections that led to a successful transfer of peace. Because of this trajectory and achievement, it's been lauded as the beacon of democracy and peace in Africa. However, it is still characterized with intermittent communal violence, chieftaincy, and inter-ethnic conflicts are all characteristics of some of the societal issues that tend to put stress and pressure on governance, security structures, and indeed its sustainable pathway to development. Chieftaincy conflicts have been one of the main sources of communal conflicts in Ghana. For those of you who are studying conflicts in the Conflict Institute, you might have read widely about various forms of conflict in Ghana, but a lot of it is chieftaincy and land disputes and conflicts. These conflicts have been characterized by wanton destruction of life, property, and of course, reversing gains that are made in development, sometimes leading to abuse of human rights, among others. Let me situate the conversation we're going to have this evening, which is looking at the Dagbon conflict as a case study and the role of an international development organization like the UNDP. Next slide. So those of you that can see the map, until 2018, 2019, where out of political expediency, we rezoned the country into about 16 regions. Ghana used to be 10 regions. So if you see the zone or the area that is marked or colored red or pink, depending on how good your sight is, is the whole of the Dagbon zone where this conflict was situated or is situated. So the Dagbon is, the kingdom is one of the oldest and one of the most organized in terms of traditional structures since the 11th century. Before the 19th centuries, it extended to some parts of the Upper West region, Upper East region, which is the yellow dotted spaces up here. It covered all these places. But if you talk of the true Dagbon area, it is the landscape that has been marked red or pink in our conversation. Next slide. So, what's the foundation of the conflict here that needs that lens of attention? Now, in the Dagbon tradition, chieftaincy is often rotated between two houses or two gates, as you may put it. The literature expands that it is up to 6 gates, but for conversations and discussions, it is often set as 2 main gates, which is the Abudu gates and the Andani gates. Now, these 2 gates are descendants of one great strong leader called the overlord, or for that matter, the chief of the kingdom. So out of tradition, each of these gates has the right to inherit and become the overlord of the Dagbon kingdom. And when you become the overlord, it is the equivalent of, probably, if you want to call it for purposes of understanding, the king of that traditional settings. As I said, the conflict predates back in the 11th century, but until March 2002, there was a fatal broke out of conflict that led to the death of the overlord of the Dagbon, Yana Andani II, and 40 others were killed in a very brutal conflict that erupted in Yendi. Yendi is the seat of the chiefdom or the kingdom of the Dagbon. Now, following this glorious conflict that erupted, the government of the day immediately kicked in some measures to contain the situation. One of the immediate issues was to deploy security forces into Yendi and the whole of the Dagbon kingdom to restore calm, peace, and order. And while the security was responding to the issue of violence and conflict and trying to come and maintain order, the government immediately reached out to some international organizations, including UNDP, that has been a trusted partner over a very long period of time. So UNDP was approached to see how we could bring our expertise, including both financial and technical, to support a kind of engagement, advocacy, and probably a roadmap that will lead to a restoration of peace, harmony, and tranquility. Of course, we all know from conflict literature that conflict has a lot of detrimental effects on development. And therefore, the only way that they could reverse or bring back the whole kingdom into track in terms of development and growth was to ensure that they restore peace and order and bring justice to the people. Along the same line, the government also set up the Waku Commission of Inquiry to investigate into the issues leading to the murder of the Yana and also the death of the 40 people. Next slide. Now, following this request by the government to United Nations Development Program in Ghana, the Regional Bureau Director of Africa, at that point in time, he was called Mr. Abdullah Jani, was invited to Ghana, and he came in April 2002. And among the preliminary observations, they found out that one of the immediate, of course, conflict has an underlying root and other causes, but one of the immediate causes that led to the scale up of the violence was the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. If you have read the literature of the Dagon people, they are warriors. I mean, they are fighters. And over the period of tradition, they have conquered a lot of groups within Ghana and also beyond. And as a result of that, they are strong in artisanal crafts and are able to manufacture small arms and light weapons, including pistols that can really be very destructive. So one of the immediate observations that was made in the course of that mission by the Regional Bureau Director was the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. And therefore, one of the ways that we could immediately help to intervene was to quell the proliferation of small arms and light weapons within the Yendi and the Dagon traditional area. In August 2002, there was a follow-up mission. And at this time, this mission was to conduct a Ghana conflict vulnerability assessment, which was concluded in 2002 November. Following this, the UN system led by UNDP and the government, and in consultation, of course, the government of Ghana, set up the UN Interagency Framework Team for the coordination of prevention of action and dispatched a team to further investigate into both the underlying and the root causes, and also to engage stakeholders that may lead to the stability of peace in the Dagon traditional area. Next slide. Now, these two conflict assessments that were conducted really framed the basis for UNDP intervention. It gave UNDP the clarity as to what the issues were, what the players were, and how they could support the government roadmap, as well as engage the people of Dagon and all the stakeholders in dialogue to bring back or restore peace. So one of the immediate and the key things that UNDP did at the time was to deploy a peace advisor who was a very seasoned professional in conflicts, peace building, and negotiations. So UNDP deployed a peace advisor who worked at the UNDP country office at the time, working with the stakeholders of the eminent chief that was set up, working with the traditional people of Dagon, and working with the security sector, the Ministry of the Interior, and other players to see how UNDP could provide or make available its technical and financial resources to ensure that the roadmap for peace was implemented. Let me be quick to point out that according to the 1992 Constitution of Ghana, issues of chieftaincy are supposed to be dealt with in a certain principle. It is independent of government interventions. Independence in the sense that government is not supposed to interfere, and which is the reason why that I was saying that in the beginning that even though we have modern institutions of governance, we still have the chieftaincy systems which are very revered. We value them, we appreciate them, and they complement the modern structures of governance system. So the 1992 Constitution of Ghana has made that clear distinction, barring any interference of politics into chieftaincy. And based on that principle, issues of chieftaincy is in principle an independent body of government and above national government and politics. Chieftaincy disputes are to be settled at the regional House of Chiefs, the National House of Chiefs, and eventually at the Court of Appeals of the lands, as it may be in that pecking order. Next slide. So following the assessment that were done earlier, as I mentioned, UNDP crafted its interventions in about 4 dimensions: the soft components and the hard components. The soft components included mediations, negotiations, advocacy, dialogue, consultations. The second set of interventions bordered on strengthening institutions and structures. The third bordered on partnership with academia, and the fourth set of interventions touched on livelihood and empowerment. And there were so many reasons, because the deep dive they did into conflict analysis did reveal a lot of interplay of stakeholders and interest groups that were supposed to be touched. So in the area of mediation, next slide please. In the area of mediation, UNDP supported what the government has put in place called the Committee of Eminent Chief. The Committee of Eminent Chief was made up of 3 distinguished, respected chiefs that were selected based on wisdom to intervene and mediate among the feuding factions in the Dagon traditional area, most particularly the 2 gates, the Andani gates and the Abudus gates. So UNDP provided its expertise, bringing its conflict mediation principles, dialogue, engagements to bear, providing training, providing skills upgrades, and also creating the platform. Now, one of the leverage of UNDP is the fact that it is seen as a neutral, trusted party, and it is able to, it has a convening power that enables it bring all players together at the table for discussion at comfort. So the eminent chief, the both gates of the Andani and the Abudu were very comfortable coming up at any platform that was convened by UNDP for dialogue, engagement, and conversations. The second intervention in the area of mediation and negotiation was around CSO capacity building. Indeed, when the war broke up, several CSOs, especially in the northern part of Ghana, took up the campaign of advocacy, peace promotion, conflict building, negotiations, and called for calm among the feuding factions. So what UNDP did was to build the capacity of these civil society organizations and societies, both faiths, including faith institutions, to be able to engage and communicate messages of peace among parties and among the citizens and people of the place. They targeted at groups and factions that were very violent throughout in the process. Some of these categories were artisans, of course. We also had people that are familiar with the northern sector. We have very strong voices like the Butchers Association, the Youth Chief Associations, and we have very strong women groups. So we empowered and emboldened these civil society organizations with mediation skills, with negotiation skills, with advocacy skills, with dialogue skills and consultation to be able to engage all these people and preach the message of peace and reconciliation, building the stages and the ground for the restoration of peace. And the third most fundamental thing was that UNDP was very deliberate in engaging directly the two gates, targeting at influential people across in politics, in business, in public services. We deliberately targeted influential people across both gates and engaged them at various instances to negotiate, to advocate, to mediate, and to ensure some dialogues behind the scenes, preparing the grounds and building on other ongoing interventions, including the work of the eminent chief. Next slide. Still, as part of the efforts and the support to negotiations, UNDP also supported the formation of the Women in Peace Building movement. This was to give voice, in most conflict settings. The literature posits that women are generally seen as peacemakers, and UNDP categorically identified the influential nature of women, brought them into some groups and society, empowered them as peacemakers and peace advocates at their home, in the community, preparing the ground towards the restoration of peace and order in the Dagon area. We trained them, we gave them skills, engagement skills, peace building skills, conflict resolution skills, making it possible for them to engage at all levels within the community and beyond. Next slide. The second leg of intervention was looking at strengthening institutions. And one of the catalytic intervention of UNDP was to set up what we call the Peace Council. Now, in the work with the civil society organizations and other stakeholders in the northern region, including the faith institutions, it was obvious that we needed institutions that could be trusted, that could be seen as neutral, that would intervene in the roadmap of the peace. So immediately, UNDP facilitated the setting up of the Northern Region Peace Council based on experiences and lessons we have gathered in other peace and conflict situations across the world. So the Northern Region Peace Council was the first peace council that UNDP facilitated to be set up in 2004. Now, following the tremendous impacts that the Northern Peace Council demonstrated in terms of bridging peace and harmony, but also helping to advance the conflict resolution and engagement between these gates, it fomented the way for the formulation of the National Peace Council. So the National Peace Council itself came into existence after the Northern Region Peace Council was formulated or set up and demonstrated evidence of value and relevance in peace negotiation. Next slide. Okay. Now, when these peace councils were set up and seemed to be very neutral, what UNDP did was to strengthen the capacity of these peace councils to be able to engage at all levels. By strengthening their capacity, first, we help in the enactment of an act to make it a body that was legitimate, that was recognized, and that could take actions. So there was an act that was passed, the Act 818, setting up the National Peace Council. Of course, all this process was done within the remit of the national space that was created, working closely with the Ministry of the Interior and, of course, key stakeholders that are responsible for conflict resolution and peace in the country. In 2013, we supported the National Peace Council to set up a 5-year strategic plan, which more or less encapsulated strategies, mechanisms, and processes that they were going to work with the regional peace councils to ensure the return of peace or the resolution of conflicts dotted across the country. Now, let's bear in mind that the conflict we are talking of here is the Dagon conflict. But let's also remember in my intro that the whole country, Ghana, at that point in time was littered with pockets of conflict across. So, based on the success of the Northern Peace Council that was set up as the first mediation instrument, UNDP facilitated the setup of the National Peace Council. And following the National Peace Council setup, 8 more peace councils were set up in the rest of the regions. And I said in my intro that until 2018, Ghana was divided into 10 regions. After 2018, based on political expediency and for some economic reasons, the country was rezoned to about 16 regions. So currently, we operate within a framework of 16 regions. But until 2018, the country was zoned into 10 regions. So we succeeded UNDP in facilitating the setup of nine regional peace councils, including the National Peace Council that is situated in the capital, Accra. Next slide. Okay. So we supported the inauguration of 9 other peace councils, as I have said, and we continue to build their capacity, bringing in technical expertise, bringing in financial resources, and helping them to be able to respond to early warning systems. Next slide. Another important intervention we did in terms of institutional setup was the setup of the Ghana National Commission on Small Arms. Remember the first mission that was conducted in 2002 by the Regional Bureau Director of UNDP. One of the things they recognized was the proliferation of small arms that actually facilitated the scale up of the conflict in Dagon. So UNDP, working with ECOWAS framework at the time, supported the government of Ghana to set up the Ghana National Commission on Small Arms and Light Weapons, which was supposed to help in the mopping up of illicit small arms and ensure lawful registration of arms in the country. They even gave small arms amnesty at some point in time for people that were holding unregistered arms to be able to return them for license registration. Next slide. The third component of institutional strengthening was partnership with the educational system. What UNDP did at that time, along the peace negotiations, the mediation, was to work with the academia to institutionalize peace and conflict studies in many of the universities. So, for example, in University of Cape Coast, we partnered with them to develop a curricula on conflict and peace. With the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Training Center, UNDP partnered with them to set up a conflict program, women and conflict program at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Among that were a lot of other conflict mapping and studies that were done with support of UNDP to really understand the conflict landscape in Ghana at that point in time and to see what measures could be put in place for amicable negotiation and also return of peace to many of the places. Next slide. Next slide. The third element was also tackling issue of livelihood because one of the triggers of conflict is poverty and joblessness. So as part of the whole support program support to restoring peace and order in the Dagon traditional area, UNDP facilitated a livelihood empowerment project. We developed the Human Security Project, which had so many elements of livelihood empowerment, including skills training, including negotiation, drawing up young men and women, boys and girls, and giving them entrepreneurial skills that they could start some livelihood businesses on their own or could help them transition from one artisanal craft into other sustainable livelihood projects that they could sustain. And in doing all these things, we ensure that there was deliberate selection of beneficiaries cutting across various divides, the two gates, but more or less looking at women, girls, children, and of course, young ones. Next slide. So, after close to 16 years of various interventions, working very closely and in confidence with the government of Ghana, the Ministry of the Interior, the security sector of Ghana, the stakeholders, the chiefs, finally, there was a broker of peace and order and restoration in the Dagon area. It is said that on February 2019, there was a successful, we want to put it that way, there was a successful restoration of peace in the Dagon traditional area. Remember that conflict dates back to the 11th century and it's pre-existed even our modern colonial system. But with the intervention of UNDP, working with the commitment of the Ghana government and also key stakeholders like the National House of Chiefs, the Regional House of Chiefs, but also particularly the people of Dagon, finally agreed to restore peace within the kingdom. Now, the reason why they did that was to put development at the center and to see that peace is an invaluable and a soft component to development. And if you don't have peace, then you cannot find development. I'll want to end here and probably take any questions that may come up. Over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Luis. That was well informing. Okay.
Oh, okay. First of all, I want to say a big thank you. I hope all of you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I want to say a big thank you to Engineer David, Osafo, Adonteng, and Luis for availing themselves for this webinar and for sharing such knowledge. Initially, I had some questions for Mr. David Osafo pertaining to the issues that he raised about the tensions among transport operators. I wanted to ask if there's been some collaboration between the National Road Safety Agency and the GPRTU on some of these issues. And aside from that, if he could comment on, because I think in his presentation, I did not hear him mention the GPRTU. And I know the GPRTU is an important player when it comes to the transport industry. I wanted to ask what were the collaboration between his agency and the GPRTU, first of all, in dealing with the COVID situation among transport operators, and secondly, dealing with the tensions that are rising among the transport operators as well. And after he answers that question, I think that we don't have much time. So after he answers that question, then I could go ahead and ask Luis as well for his questions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kojo.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I think you can hear me. Okay, good. Thanks also very much for listening to me and listening to Luis. But Luis, good job. Well done. You've done a good job, and I'm also well informed. I live here in Ghana, but I think your presentation is telling me you are more Ghanaian than I am. So good job. Good job. I'm highly informed. Yes, I think that, Kojo, the institution that is mandated by law to regulate transport operators in Ghana, we had that mandate just in 2019. Until recently, we had no power to regulate the industry, but now we have the power. We have already signaled the transport operators, and GPRTU, as I said, appeared to be one of the big and the champions in all these conflict situations and the tension that I envisage can come any moment from now. Unfortunately, they are not alone, even though they are the largest, but they are not alone. There are others whom we call the Ghana Road Transport Coordinating Council. They happen to be the umbrella body for all the transport operators. We have had our first engagement with them. In fact, we have managed to cool down the tension since last year, March, when the lockdown came up. Our continuous collaboration with them has sustained the situation till now. But I am sure at a certain point in time, we may not be able to control it, because for almost 1 year, we have held the fort, making them appreciate the fact that they are contributing to national development. Failure of their services will ground the economy completely. Now, they seem to be appreciating our effort in that respect. More so, we did that because last year was an election year, and government did not want anything to jeopardize elections. So we put in place all these measures, collaboration, speaking to them at all times, engagement, advocacy. But I think that the 1 year is over, the elections are over. Government has now deployed their ministers, and so ministers have settled, and we need to go back to the drawing board again. This time, they are asking for increases in transport fares. This is one compensation that we can guarantee them. If we all agree that we give them an increase to compensate for the 1 year loss, I think it will end it all. I am hoping that in the coming days, the Minister of Transport will give us the audience to go and discuss it. But I think that is the trump card now. If they get that their increases, which is one of, I think, the promises that we're giving them, then I'm sure we can make some headway. Otherwise, then it will be another story. That's why I'm challenging Jennifer to come and help me.
All right, thank you. Kojo, I think we have the next
yes,
5 minutes.
Let me just
end the program.
ask Louise just one question. I have quite a lot, but given the time, I would just ask him one question. Mr. Engineer David Osafo, thank you so much for your response. Really appreciate the response and the answers. And I think it's something that we can, since it's a conflict thing and tensions are rising, something that further dialogue of it. For Mr. Louise, I have so much to ask you because, like Mr. David said, the Gabon issue, so far as you are Ghanaian, you have quite some knowledge about it. And but I would like for you to touch on two major issues for me. We all understand that there are political undertones to this conflict, where political parties side one party against another. And how did that impact the UNDP's work in working in this particular situation? Secondly, you talked about the empowerment of youth and women. Now that we have resolution in place, what are the objectives for the UNDP for these youth and women? What kind of work is going to continue for them? Are they going to be just left and not no attention given to them, or the UNDP is going to continue to empower them to maybe set up some means of micro businesses or some means of activities that would, at the end of the day, uplift them from the poverty that most of them find themselves in? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for the very insightful questions. Like I said, this Dagbon conflict predates back, and indeed, all the assessments that have been done really identify, among others, political undertones and influence, and even to some extent that sometimes, just for the purposes of listening here, the two gates are aligned in one way or the other. People color them or paint them that to be belonging to also the two big political parties that we have in Ghana. So there is that kind of alignment, whether it is true or not true, but I mean, these are thoughts and these are assumptions, and assumptions can be very true when you torture them for a very long time. Yes, but UNDP role in this whole space is because of our neutrality and our ability to broker. And I think one of the reasons why over the years we've been able to work successfully across governments, across parties, is the fact that we've been neutral, we are trusted, and the eminent chiefs, who were probably the three kingpins put together to lead and set up this roadmap, trusted the neutrality of UNDP, including the two main gates involved in this whole issue. Like I said, behind the scene, UNDP was able to bring the influential people across these two gates. You will find them in politics, you will find them in businesses, you will find them in the private sector, everywhere. Talking with them and assuring them that at the end of the day, what UNDP is looking for is to help the government efforts. And when I say the government efforts, yes, it's the entire people of Ghana, especially the people of Dagbon, who were more touched by this whole situation to bring peace back to the table. So it's because of our neutrality. We've not been playing around the political gallery. We do recognize that they exist, but we try to foster some neutral engagement around them. With regards to the empowerment, indeed, the Human Security Project, which was deliberately crafted to support this program, ended in 2018. Beyond that, we have been trying to mobilize more resources. But now we are working within the vision of the country where we want to take our Ghana beyond AIDS, which is making sure that poverty is actually addressed. But I think the issue of youth unemployment, women empowerment, job really goes beyond UNDP intervention. We need a deliberate strategy. We need everybody's hand on deck. And before I probably conclude, let me probably use this opportunity to really acknowledge some players and partners that were part of this whole peace transition process. We can talk of Danida, we can talk of the USA, and indeed Canada, who is hosting this conversation. The embassy in Ghana or the whatever in Ghana was able to provide some financial support. Norway, UN Women, and of course, other United Nations players were able to provide resources to UNDP to be able to do all these things. So, Kojo, your question is very relevant, but I think we need many more hands on deck to be able to address the issue of youth unemployment and especially women empowerment. It's very important.
Thank you very much, all of you, especially our wonderful presenters. I'm handing over to Dr. Kosa to do the official conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer, for a brilliant moderation of the session. And from Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, we must appreciate Engineer David Osafo and Luis's very insightful presentations. And it is fascinating to note from our side the correlation between the road traffic accident and COVID. I had no clue till this morning when Engineer David presented. Should there be any correlation? It's kind of opened up a new, I think, idea and chapter which possibly Koazo Jennifer might take up as a next research project. But it's wonderful, idea and example that Engineer David showed us this morning. And also, Mr. Lewis's presentation is equally important in order to understand how the local conflict in that particular area is being helped by UNDP as an honest broker. Often we have had a lot of criticism against United Nations bodies. Mr. Lewis might be aware as well. Especially, I research on Rohingya crisis, and there are many allegations launched against permanent residency in Myanmar for an early warning and all. But despite of that, we do understand that UNDP is an honest broker, and it does its best in order to bring the conflicting parties in dialogue and resolution of the conflict. So in conclusion, I'm very proud for Jennifer, who successfully not only arranged, coordinated, but also today successfully moderated this session. I hope she would be continuously help CRRIC and others to arrange such seminars. So at the end, stay well and stay safe wherever you are. And it's a wonderful cooperation across the continent. Thank you very much once again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.